Hey guys, welcome to Freedom Fishing. I'm going to do a little bit of a different video today. I'm just to consider myself maybe a little better than an average fisherman, but I do have 10 tips that I like to give to somebody who's kind of a new fisherman, somebody who's just starting out in the sport of fishing that I love so much. And so these are not in any particular order. They're not from number 1 to number 10 in priority, just 10 things that I try to do that help me, I think, catch a few more fish. So tip number 1 is structure. Moving water, where am I fishing? You always want to be fishing somewhere where there's some structure and moving water. Those are two key components. So, when you're in stagnant waters, especially I'm speaking about salt water, of course, stagnant water tends to be a little less fish in the area. You want structure where the small bait fish are hiding, and moving current where the bait fish are getting swept away and the predator fish are going to sit there and ambush. So number 1 will be make sure you're near some kind of structure or some type of moving water. Number 2, move. You don't want to be in the same location all the time. If you are in a spot and there's no fish and you're not getting bites, you need to move. And that's something that I've had to learn the hard way. I have really struggled with this piece. I tend to give too much time sometimes to one location. And so moving is very, very important. If you're in a spot and you've moved around, you've tried different depths, different areas, different baits even, then you need to move if you're not catching fish. So don't stay stagnant too long if there's nothing going on. Tip number 3 would be to clean your rods. This is really important. I've got friends who fish with me, and after a while of fishing with them, I noticed their rods are getting rusted out pretty quick. You have to run fresh water over your saltwater rod after every single trip. Even if you don't use that rod while fishing that day, I take 4 rods with me when I fish typically. And if I don't use a rod, I still rinse it off. Take the hose, give a nice rinse of the reel, the entire rod, and make sure you give it a nice dousing to get any salt that's in there. That salt, even in the air, can be corrosive. Change frayed line. So tip number 4, change frayed line. Man, this has hurt me so many times. As I get to my leader and I feel that leader and I can feel a little bit of fray in there where there's some damage to the line, you need to change that. Too many times I've felt it and thought, it's okay. And then next cast I got a big fish and lost it. So change frayed line as often as you can. And be smart. You don't want to lose that big fish because you were too lazy, like I've done many, many, many times. Tip number 5, you don't have to spend a lot of money to get started. Some of my rods, I've got some $59, $69 combo, the rod and the reel for $59, $69, especially when you're starting out. Don't go too deep. You might make mistakes. You might break them. You need to learn and make sure this is something you're going to do and invest. You can catch big fish on light rods. I took a friend fishing recently, one of my videos, and the Zebco 202, they bought 2 of them for their kids. We caught redfish and black drum on those Zebco 202s. So you don't have to spend a lot of money. Be smart. Your tackles, your rods, etc. Be smart about that. Tip number 6, learn to catch bait fish. Again, something that I've struggled with. I get kind of lazy at times, but you need to learn to catch some of your own bait fish. Whatever bait you're using, if you find bait in the area that the fish are probably feeding on, finding a way to catch those sabiki, small hooks with little pieces of shrimp or fish bites on them, a minnow bucket, a cast net. Finding a way to catch your own bait is really important because a lot of times those fish are feeding on the bait that are around and they're not going to eat your live shrimp, but there's a whole bunch of white fresh bait or live finger mullet around. So catching your own bait is really, really important. Tip number 7, hook size matters. I'll tell you what, that to me is one of the biggest tips, honestly. People tend to use too big a hook. I use the smallest hook possible that I think can handle a big fish if I got a big fish there. And I can only name 1 fish I believe I've lost that broke my hook because it was too big for the hook I was using. So hook size matters. The smallest hook you can possibly use is going to be the right hook to use, and you can always go up. But man, if you find you're losing a bunch of fish, it might literally be the size of the hook that's the problem. A lot of fish's mouths are very small. So using the smallest hook you possibly can. Hold the rod. I tell you, I fish typically with 2 rods. So I'm always holding one, the one I expect to get the most action on. And then I might have another one out in a rod holder. I lose more fish on the rod holder rod than the one I'm holding, of course, because I can react immediately with the rod that I'm holding. So hold the rod when you can. Look, it's fine to throw a couple rods out and sit in a chair and watch them. That's fine and dandy. Surf fishing and things like that, you might have to do that. But if you're in a boat or onshore doing inshore stuff, I highly suggest that you hold one of the rods. Tip number 9, least amount of weight you can possibly use. So smallest hook you can use and least amount of weight. Free lining is my favorite way to fish a live bait, because that bait can do whatever it wants to do. There's no weight to hinder it one way or the other. It can swim freely, and that is going to attract more fish because it's in a natural, reaction. It's swimming naturally. So I use the lightest weight I possibly can so that I can really let that bait do what it needs to do. That's really, really important. Use the lightest weight you can. And then lastly, my last tip, I'm going to use my rod to show here, is I like to put my finger on the line. This to me is a really big secret. A lot of people hold their rod like this and they can feel their rod when it bends, but I take my finger and I have my finger on the line at all times. I can feel my shrimp get nervous. I can feel it moving around. I can feel every little tiny bite, and I can get ready for that hit, and I can catch more fish because I've got my finger on the line. Just like I've got right here, I turn my spool so it's in a position where I can just put my finger right on the line right there. I bend it a little bit, so anything that happens, a little bit of movement from shrimp, and especially with braided line, this is really going to be simple. So putting your finger on the line. So those are my 10 tips for beginners just starting out to fish, or even if you've been fishing a long time and you don't catch a lot of fish. Those are my top 10 tips that you should use. It's funny, you go on a boat. I've been on charters before with friends inshore, and I'm catching 10, 11, 12 fish, and I got a friend on the same exact boat catching nothing. And he's just not doing some of these things we talked about here, not doing it right. I know that sounds funny, but there are little things like this that can make a big difference from you coming home with some nice keepers for dinner and coming home with no fish at all and some disappointment. So guys, thanks for watching the channel. Thanks for liking and subscribing, and please share, and really appreciate all you've done for me and the channel. And we got the new hat. We're not selling any merch. We're not big enough to do that yet, but we got the logo, and we're moving forward with that. We got a giveaway coming up soon on one of my previous videos, so go check that out. Thanks for watching this, guys. I hope it helps. Please comment below if any of these tips help you out. Have a great day. God bless.